On the phone with us, Dr. Robert Godby. He is Director of Energy, Economics, and Public Policy Center. Thank you for coming on the program this morning, Doctor.
Thanks for having me.
So we were talking earlier with the governor, and of course this is about the most distressing time I've seen for energies like oil, gas, coal, because some of those numbers are either zero or in the negative. So what's the game plan here? How do we recover from this?
Wow.
Big question. I'll start with the easy question
right?
first. We'll work from there.
So really, at this point, we just have to hang on. There's nothing that we can do about this, and anything that we could start to do for planning in the long term clearly doesn't help us right now. But Wyoming is a commodity-producing state, and commodities are, the price of commodity and demand for those commodities is determined nationally and worldwide. So, it's kind of like we got a ticket to the world's wildest roller coaster, and we're just hanging on.
And, Doctor, how drastically has this pandemic and some of these other factors impacted Wyoming's energy producers? I mean, can you describe that for coal, oil, and gas in particular?
I can do my best. So I'll preface this at the beginning by saying that we don't really know what's happened in oil and gas yet. Official numbers, the numbers that we do have are just beginning to come in for March. We do have February numbers, but of course, February was a whole different time. We do know what's happening with coal, and with coal, it's been a pretty significant decline. We were already in bad shape with coal. We all know the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of give you some numbers, over all of last year, coal deliveries out of Wyoming averaged about 5.3 million tons a week. This year, and that was a terrible year, actually. It was the worst year in more than 20. Through this year, through to about March 9th, so the week when the coronavirus really hit the United States economy, we were averaging about 4.5 million tons per week. So we were down about 15% over that already record low. Right now, we're down about 40% year over year. And most of that is due to the coronavirus. So it's basically doubled the decline plus. And as people have heard, that sector is beginning to shed jobs like everybody else. In the past 4 to 6 weeks, we've seen about 425 workers laid off in the Powder River Basin. And Arch Coal is asking their workers right now if anybody wants to take a voluntary leave before they probably have to do the same thing. So coal's getting hit pretty hard, and sadly, coal is probably the bright spot.
Okay, and I was getting to that because the oil industry, we have seen such a worldwide glut, not just in what's stored on land, but with tankers all over the world sitting offshore. So we first have to start using what we have on land, then we have to bring that oil offshore onto land from those tankers. So it might be a while before we burn through that, before we can start pumping again.
That's right. So we are part of a worldwide market, and demand has collapsed for oil. So to give you a sense of that, some really easy numbers, but they're huge. On an average day before this all happened, world demand was about 100 million barrels a day. And about 30% of that demand has just disappeared over the past month to 2 months. So, we're 30 million barrels a day come up out of the ground, and we got to find a place to put it because people aren't using it. And as you know, there was a lot of storage, but now it's all used up. And so that's a huge problem as well. And when you get to the point where nobody wants it, nobody has any place to put it, that's when something effectively becomes a zero-price commodity.
Sure.
And that's hit Wyoming as badly as it's hit anybody.
And regarding oil, I mean, obviously there's a little more at play than the virus, particularly in the past 2 months. How have decisions by OPEC and Russia impacted energy production here?
Well, a lot of people have talked about that, and it made a lot of news early on. So early in March, before we were really in the lockdowns that we are now, we saw oil prices drop from about $50 to about $40 just due to weakened demand worldwide. And that was the coronavirus. Then on the weekend of March 8th, this price war kind of erupted, and prices fell for Wyoming oil. Well, let's talk about West Texas because that's what people hear about. Fell from the low 40s to the high 20s, low 30s. And so that's the impact that the Saudi effect has had. But the coronavirus has now dropped that down to zero. So while the price war has gotten a lot of press, it's really not what's driving this. The agreement that they came to end the price war takes about 10 million barrels off the market, and that agreement really starts today. But remember, we have about a 30 million barrel per day surplus. So it doesn't really change the fundamental economics. It's just meant that, now we got to find a place to put 20 million barrels, or we have to stop producing instead of that 30 million barrels that we had surplus before. So the fundamental problems still remain. It's where to put that oil, and we're beginning to see a lot of this now. Production is just being shut in, and that often means destroying wells. Here in Wyoming, in the oil and gas and mining sector, so we kind of combine the data. We've had about 2,500 job losses since this all started at the beginning of March in coal, oil, and gas primarily. We know about 425, 450 are probably in the coal sector. That means that we've lost about 2,000 jobs in about 6-7 weeks. And as we look at the data come in week by week with those, initial claims for unemployment that everybody talks about every week now, oil and gas has gone from being one of the, lesser impacts on unemployment as, restaurants and other industries in the state shut down to being really the second largest sector with new unemployment after, the leisure and hospitality industry.
Dr. Godby, we have to worry then about the stock market, commodities market, because in order to start pumping again, they, in large part, get their money from investors coming along and paying them with the hopes of getting some interest, something off of it. So how do we make sure that the markets are working the way they're supposed to be on the restart?
Well, the market, luckily in this crisis, and this is definitely different from 2008-9, the Federal Reserve has done a really good job. We don't have a financial crisis, is the bottom line. The problem right now, as you noted, is investors really don't want to put their money in anything that's got any risk. And the energy, especially the oil and gas industry, the smaller and mid-sized players, rely on debt to get going. So you're absolutely right. This will be a chicken and egg problem. When we start again, and there will be a start again, this will eventually pass. We'll probably get the pendulum swinging in the other direction. The problem so far has been demand dropped faster than supply could adjust. In the other direction, when demand comes back, supply will have to adjust in the other direction, and it won't be quick. As you note, if investors won't invest, people won't be able to bring production back online as quickly. Prices are going to rise, and then you're going to see, hopefully that will draw the investors back into the market. But until that happy day comes, we're just going to have to wait and see.
And like you said, there's no telling when that day might be.
Yeah, this is the real frustration of this. Every other recession has depended on economic factors, whether it was oil price shocks in the 70s or, government policy raising interest rates in the 80s, Iraq war in the 90s, the financial. They were all economic shocks. This one is entirely dependent on how this virus goes, because if we get a resurgence in the fall, we could start again, reopening. That's what everybody wants to see. Everybody's dreaming of the day when life feels like it's starting to go back to normal. It'll never be quite the same.
Okay.
And then suddenly the bottom could fall out. So that's the frustration.
Thank you for joining us, Doctor. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, sir.